The night was so cold that even the wind seemed to cry as it moved through the empty streets. Snow drifted quietly across the sidewalks, covering the city in a silent white blanket, but beneath that beauty was a cruel reality that many people never noticed. While warm lights glowed from the windows of houses and laughter echoed behind closed doors, there were still souls wandering outside with nowhere to go. On that particular night, one woman stood trembling in the freezing darkness, staring at a small cabin where a fire burned softly inside. Her lips were pale, her hands shaking, and hope was the only thing keeping her standing. She knocked softly and whispered words that would change 2 lives forever. "May I warm up by your fire?" Before we continue this story, if you believe that a small act of kindness can change someone's life forever, please take a moment to like this video, comment, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to the Kindness Chronicles so we can continue sharing stories that remind the world that humanity is still alive. The woman who stood outside that door had not always lived a life of struggle. Years earlier she had been someone full of dreams, laughter, and plans for the future. Her name was Anna, and once she had a home, a family, and a heart that believed the world was safe. But life has a way of changing directions when we least expect it. A series of painful events had slowly taken everything from her, piece by piece, like waves washing away footprints in the sand. First came the loss of her parents, then a job that disappeared during hard economic times, and finally a relationship she believed would save her but instead shattered what little strength she had left. Within a few short years, the life she once knew vanished completely, leaving her wandering through unfamiliar streets with nothing but a thin coat and a heart full of exhaustion. That winter had been particularly brutal. Temperatures dropped lower than anyone remembered, and shelters across the city were overflowing with people who needed warmth. Anna had spent nights sleeping under bridges, in abandoned bus stops, and once even inside a broken-down car that offered barely any protection from the biting wind. Each morning she woke up colder than the last, wondering if the world had simply forgotten people like her. Yet despite everything, she still carried a quiet spark inside her. A fragile belief that somewhere, somehow, kindness still existed. On the edge of the city, far from the crowded streets and tall buildings, there stood a small wooden cabin surrounded by tall pine trees. Smoke curled from its chimney, and a gentle orange glow flickered through its window. Inside lived a man named Daniel, a quiet soul who preferred solitude over the noise of the world. Years earlier he too had experienced loss, the kind that leaves deep scars no one else can see. After losing his wife and daughter in a tragic accident, Daniel had withdrawn from society, choosing a life of quiet reflection in the forest rather than facing the reminders of what he had lost. His days were simple. He chopped wood, tended a small garden during warmer months, and spent long evenings sitting beside the fire reading old books. Though he rarely spoke to anyone, his heart had never become cruel. It had only grown cautious, guarded by memories that still ached whenever he allowed himself to think about them. That night, as the storm grew stronger, Daniel sat quietly in his chair, staring at the flames dancing in the fireplace. The wind rattled the cabin walls, but the warmth inside created a peaceful shelter from the world outside. Just as he reached for another piece of wood to feed the fire, a faint sound reached his ears. It was so soft he almost believed he imagined it. A hesitant knock against the wooden door. At first he remained still, listening carefully. Another knock came, slightly louder this time, followed by a fragile voice barely strong enough to carry through the storm. The words were simple, yet filled with desperation. The woman standing outside whispered that she only needed a moment by the fire, just enough warmth to survive the night. Daniel stood slowly, his heart unexpectedly heavy as he walked toward the door. Years of solitude had made him cautious of strangers, yet something about the trembling voice stirred a memory deep within him. When he opened the door, the cold wind rushed inside, carrying with it the sight of a woman whose exhaustion was written across every part of her face. Snow clung to her hair, her coat was worn and thin, and her eyes held the quiet pain of someone who had been fighting alone for far too long. For a brief moment neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with a single careless word. Anna lowered her gaze, expecting the door to close just as so many others had before. But Daniel did not shut the door. Instead, he stepped aside and allowed the warmth of the cabin to spill out into the frozen night. As she entered, Anna felt something she had not experienced in months: safety. The fire crackled softly, its warmth spreading through the room like a gentle embrace. She stood near it carefully, afraid that even being there might somehow be a mistake. Daniel watched quietly, noticing how her hands shook as she held them close to the flames. In that moment, he realized something important. Sometimes the world does not change through grand heroic acts, but through small choices that open doors when someone else has nowhere left to turn. As the minutes passed, Anna slowly began to feel life returning to her frozen fingers. The warmth eased the pain in her bones, but something else began to thaw as well. The heavy loneliness she had carried for so long. She had expected nothing more than a few moments beside the fire before being sent back into the storm, yet the quiet kindness in that room felt different. Daniel eventually spoke words that surprised even himself. He told her she could stay until the storm passed. The sentence was simple, but for Anna it sounded like the first ray of sunlight after a long dark night. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them, because sometimes the smallest kindness arrives exactly when a person has almost stopped believing kindness exists. Hours passed as the storm continued outside, but inside the cabin something unexpected began to happen. Two strangers who had once believed their lives were broken started sharing pieces of their stories. Not through dramatic speeches or grand confessions, but through quiet understanding. Daniel saw the strength hidden behind Anna's exhaustion, and Anna sensed the kindness behind Daniel's quiet solitude. For the first time in years, Daniel realized that the silence in his cabin had not been peace, it had been loneliness disguised as safety. And Anna discovered that her life had not ended simply because it had become difficult. When morning finally arrived, the storm had disappeared, leaving the forest covered in sparkling snow beneath a soft golden sunrise. Anna stood near the door, unsure what would happen next. Part of her expected to return to the same uncertain life she had been living the day before. But Daniel looked at her with a quiet calm and said something that would stay in her heart forever. He told her that sometimes life brings people together not by accident, but because both of them need a reason to keep believing in tomorrow. Those words changed everything. Over the weeks that followed, Anna slowly rebuilt pieces of her life. She helped Daniel with small tasks around the cabin, and in return he offered her a place where she could rest and begin again. The broken pieces of two separate lives slowly formed something stronger together: hope. The cabin that had once been a lonely refuge became a place of quiet laughter, shared meals, and gentle healing. Anna eventually found work in a nearby town, and Daniel discovered that opening his door had also opened his heart again. Years later, Anna would often remember the moment she stood in the snow whispering those fragile words. She had believed she was asking for warmth from a fire, but what she truly received was something far greater: a second chance at life. And Daniel would remember that night as the moment he realized that even a heart weighed down by grief can still become a light for someone else. Before we end this story, if it touched your heart even a little, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the Kindness Chronicles so more people can hear stories that remind us how powerful compassion can be. And here is a special request from the heart: please write in the comments one simple line: kindness can change a life. Because sometimes a single warm fire, a single open door, and a single kind sentence are all it takes to change someone's world forever.